Hello and welcome to After the Bell. It really does feel like the bell has just stopped ringing on Canelo Alvarez's impressive performance against Callum Smith. He won almost every round to become a unified super middleweight world champion and a genuine four-weight world champion. I'm Martin Domin, joined again by George Groves and Declan Taylor. If you're watching the video, please do give it a thumbs up and do subscribe to the channel if you're listening later on. Please rate and review. We're coming to you from Tier 4. Thank you, Boris. But there were no restrictions on Canelo Alvarez. Brilliant performance. George, we saw last weekend.
Hold on. Whoa. Can I just ask quickly before we start? We had a question from someone on Twitter. Joe Bangles CBE. He said, George, what's your favourite cheese? And I thought, just as it's Christmas, a very festive question, really. Before we get onto the boxing, let's just start with the important stuff. I just wanted to know what George's favourite cheese is because I can't concentrate until I know.
I am a cheese man lately.
I knew you were a cheese man because I remember when you were boxing, you were a cheese man as well.
Well, that shocks me. Because I thought I was, a newly evolved sort of cheese man. At the moment, I do go for the cheese board for dessert rather than anything else, and it's a goat's cheese, a soft, semi-soft goat's cheese would be preference of choice. Don't ask me to name any. I'm not that that into cheese, but a semi-soft goat cheese is it's a must-have. I don't know if it's festive or not.
That is very festive.
Fig with fig chutney or something. That's gonna hit. It's gonna hit the. Make sure your crackers are on point.
Arsene Wenger's favourite cheese as well, the goat's cheese, by the way.
Well, there you go.
I wish I knew what Canelo's was.
He is the cheese. He's the big cheese.
He's the big cheese. Yes. Get back to boxing. Easy work, Martin. Very good.
So, I love the little interlude there. But so for me, George, as I said, there's plenty of ways to win a fight, and sometimes it's a highlight reel knockout. But last night, what we saw was a man who controlled the ring, who controlled the opponent for 12 rounds. His shot selection was phenomenal. He landed 43% of his punches. So little waste there. I was obviously enthused. What did you take away from it?
Yeah, so I watched the fight. I did cover for 5 Live, and so you're watching diligently, and I'm watching via like a Skype call because our DAZN, like if you watch it on DAZN, it was had a bit of a delay. So what I couldn't really tell was exactly how hard the power shots were going in, but it seemed like that was the difference in many aspects of the fight for me, was just the effect Canelo's shots were having on Smith and the non-effect that Smith's shots were having on Alvarez. So Alvarez, you've got to be able to keep him honest. And when I say keep him honest, that's just keep him in his place, keep him in his box. Do not let him march you down. Smith couldn't do that at all in the fight. He was literally marched down from the very start. The first round I scored even because there just wasn't really much in it. I think if you had to pick someone, you would have gone with Alvarez. I think I can't remember. I put the asterisks, but there was nothing in the first round other than that. He's marching forward. And Smith is not that fighter who likes to fight off the ropes. He's got the catch and fire style, definitely, but that's very difficult to get off against Alvarez, who's a smaller guy. So you've got less target to punch at. Phenomenal upper body defenses. So from the waist up, he's just hyper mobile. The angles he can take at the speed, he can make them defensive adjustments, without necessarily even having to adjust his feet that much, as well as the final straw, which is very demoralizing for any fighter, is he has that Mexican or even that South Americanness where they turn away from shots. You watch Duran and all them other amazing fighters. He just turns away from a shot and you think, oh, has that one gone for it? No, it hasn't. Like, he hasn't actually landed. It looks like he's knocked his head back, but he hasn't. You see more of that in the second half of the fight when he's fully established into the fight. Both fighters are There was sort of a spell where Smith, one of the mid rounds, maybe 6 or something, I got scored to him where he just picked up his activity. But other than that, it was a great performance from Alvarez, and I think he showed. The one concern that would have been for me is how's he going to deal with Smith's size, because it's not just his height and reach. He's a big guy. He's a big guy, and a naturally bigger guy will be hitting harder, But I think it just goes to show that Smith, for me, probably number one division. If you take out the likes of Alvarez, where you're not exactly sure what division he was going to put him in before, last night, this morning. Now I think he is a super middleweight. He's definitely number one super middleweight in the world, and by some distance, there might be like a Caleb Plant who could give him an awkward night's work. There may be a Benavidez or something who's just a big guy again, but is he are you talking about a light heavyweight fight here or a super middleweight fight? Really, his toughest test out there is a middleweight for me in Gennady Golovkin. So terrific performance from him. Done the job. The question mark for me was dealing with the size, and he bullied Smith from start to finish. Smith sort of alluded at the end that he thinks he's outgrown the weight, and that I made it on the scales, but of course it's a different kettle of fish once you're ring walker. You need to feel strong. You need to feel like the athlete that you are. And maybe he is that much better a fighter at 175, where his legs are under him. He's got a little bit more urgency. There was no change of pace from Smith. There was nothing really snappy about his work. He said in the corner that he had an arm injury. Even then, you're like, if he's had a tear on his bicep, that could be because you're very close and tight on the weight. That has an effect on your body. So he might have outgrown. It wouldn't surprise me in the slightest if he hadn't outgrown the division a long time ago, and now his future lies at light heavyweight. But terrific performance from Alvarez.
Declan, were you surprised at all that Smith wasn't able to use his height, his reach advantage? I mean, it was talked about all week. The pictures, if you chose a certain angle, I mean, obviously there was always a difference, but certain angles it looked ridiculous, that the height disparity.
Yeah, a little bit surprised, because although we did say last week that we'd already seen Alvarez in with Kovalev, who's bigger than Smith, or at least equally sizable compared to Canelo. And he dealt with him. I mean, Kovalev and Smith have different styles, but just physically, he did deal with him and obviously stopped him in the end. So we sort of knew the jury wasn't necessarily out on that. But then when those pictures came back in, I was like, whoa, this is massive. But then the important thing, if you're that much bigger, is you've got to get respect early. Much like, for instance, Teofimo Lopez did against Lomachenko. He got his respect early, first round, and Loma was like, whoa, okay, this guy punched really hard. Maybe he is a lot bigger than me, but that didn't happen. Like George said, I actually did give Smith the first round, but it could have gone either way. Maybe it was even, and I gave him the fifth, but it needed the first, second, third round to just be a bit more assertive. And it almost felt like he was not there to make up the numbers, but, he was clearly the sideshow. He walked first as a champion, which says it all. So slightly disappointed, but I think the big caveat here is that we're talking about a great fighter, an all-time great fighter in Canelo. So you can't have a go at Smith. He was just beaten by someone who, look what he's done. He's such a small guy. He's a really 54-pounder, and he's gone up and he's gone for the best at the weight with no problems, and then beaten him 11-1, 10-2 at worst. It's just like, that is a serious performance, and a bit like what you said there, Martin, is, you can have a highlight reel knockout, but actually when you go and dominate someone for 12 rounds like that, every shot in the book, the defensive stuff was amazing. At no point did he look in any trouble whatsoever. That's far more impressive for me than just going and chinning someone. Mainly, I was really impressed with his work to the head, because we all thought the body shots, he's a great body puncher and all that real estate in front of him to get at, but the head stuff was amazing. The uppercuts through the middle, through the guard, pinpoint accuracy. I don't think you can have a go at Smith at all. Maybe the tactics were slightly wrong, or you can talk about that as much as you want. I don't think he's beating Canelo on any night. Just an exceptional fighter. And like George said, straight in number one at the weight.
Yeah, you can't argue with him sort of picking his, maybe Kovalev slightly, but you can't argue with him picking Callum Smith as a sort of second choice, if you like, to Billy Joe Saunders earlier this year. George, you mentioned the word demoralising. That's kind of how it must have felt for Callum Smith, because presumably you're in there, you can plan as much as you like, but once you've got 3, 4, 5 rounds out the way and you're just thinking, as good as I am, and I am good, I can't do anything with this guy.
Ran into the corner, and they cut to the brothers after 3 or 4 rounds, and they were all up. They were smiling, they were clapping. It was positive from them in the corner, and then Joe Gallagher sat down with him, and talking in the break, and it was as if they thought he was edging the rounds. When for me, I'm thinking he's definitely not doing enough of the good work to be winning these rounds. You can see some of the stats coming up from DAZN, the punch counts, the power shot percentages. I mean, I never really read into that too much because I always wonder who is doing that. It's just someone there going, that was a good shot. Nope, won't score that. So that that guy could be sitting there with a Mexican flag on, and so. But yeah, I felt like after a quarter, a third of the fight, 4 rounds in, he must have felt that this is a hard fight, and he's behind, and he needs to make some changes and adjustments. And it's easy said than done a lot of the times, for fighters. Obviously, you're saying, right, well, just back him up. Don't let him walk you down. Don't let him do this. But there's a reason why he's a 4-weight world champion, Alvarez. He's able to do that. He can do that. It's surprising. You do wonder what it is about him that allows this guy who looks that much smaller in the ring to just march the guy down in front of him, sometimes behind not even that specifically clever work. It's just a momentum thing. Once the guy's given away that ground in front of him, he's conceded that ground in front of him, he's on the ropes, and then it's just like they're just moving around, stepping around, and he's following. Obviously, he has a fantastic ability to cut the ring off, get himself into punching range, and to let his shots go. He throws any shot he wants with power, which is dangerous. It doesn't matter whether it's coming up through the middle, around the side. At times he'll show, and you can see that the angle looks like it's going to go to the body, maybe behind the elbow, and then it ends up landing on top of the shoulder or on top of the head. They're things that fighters should be doing in the gym, drilling, learning how to do that, how to take away them subtle tells that, that one's coming downstairs, or cover that one's coming upstairs. But with someone like Alvarez, he's brilliant at not giving away them tells, and punching hard, just punching. It looks like he's powerful. I don't think Smith was ever really in real trouble where he looked like he was going to stop, but he never looked like he was in the fight. He never looked like he was able to change gears. Again, allude to maybe the weight might have played a factor. It might have just been the occasion. It might have been, the fact that the fight was made felt like only weeks' notice rather than months' notice. And it was a big ask for him, tall ask. You think of the names on Alvarez's resume, Smith, it's not a big fight for him. Whereas the other way, you look at it the other way around, this is a career-defining fight for Callum Smith. So, all that stuff's obviously gonna play a factor. But yeah, I mean, from technical kind of breakdown, like if you're gonna have success with someone like Alvarez, first of all, you can't let him march you down. So you got to keep him honest. You got to, how you can do that. You've got to have a good jab. I think, it can't be a busy jab or a lazy jab or just a jab for jab's sake, because all the best fighters out there will punch off that and pick holes in your jab. So it's got to have an authority. You've got to be head movement. You've got to match him like for like. Some of the commentary was hearing saying about how Alvarez would match Smith in certain departments, but that's what you've got to do with Alvarez. If he's being aggressive with head movement, then you be aggressive with head movement back to him. You mirror him, because the second you try and be reactive to him with something else, you run the risk of him falling into his trap that he's trying to set. And two, if you just be not negative, but you're stepping back and you're allowing him to gain that sort of momentum, unless you are an out and out, counter puncher that likes to, fire off with someone, lay on the ropes and stick a move, it's not going to work,
I suspect the answer to this will be no doubt. But do you think if Callum Smith had had more than 4 or 5 weeks, presumably he struggled to fly in sparring partners, if you can even replicate Canelo in sparring, would it have made much difference?
I think he would have. Yeah, I do think it would have been a slightly different fight. I don't think he would have won, but there was no second gear, or there was no level up. Like what he needed to do when he was behind after 6 was try something. I gave him the 5th round, I think, when he came out and sort of went for it a little bit, but you could just see the energy and everything just draining out of him, which is not helped by the weight. I think he said after that he's been on the weight too long. So yeah, I mean, it's not ideal, is it? It's never going to be ideal to box Canelo on 4 weeks' notice. I mean, he's been in the gym, he's so diligent, and he's super fit. I mean, just making the weight at that size is unbelievable anyway. I do think a longer camp, a longer notice would have helped him. It wouldn't have. I don't see him winning, but maybe he wouldn't have faded, because he faded badly. And obviously that's not helped by the punishment he's shipping. And then the more faded you are, the more you're backing off, the more you're getting caught. It's like a snowball. So that would have been tough, and it was hard to watch at times, the last few rounds. But I mean, credit as well to Smith, because they could have pulled him out, but he obviously didn't go down. He was never really in massive trouble. He stuck in there. But Canelo, having not had to cut whatsoever, it's just so strong. And can you just imagine that feeling of Smith sitting down in between the 11th and 12th round, just totally dejected, finished, and he looks over and Canelo's up on his, not just standing up, but pacing around his corner, and it's just like at that point, in big fights, when both fighters have had to cut and clearly struggled at the weight or whatever, they sort of both go like this as the fight draws on. But there was none of that. There was only one fighter who was fading and one who just seemed to get stronger and more confident. So I do think that was a bit of a factor. Would he have beaten him on points? No. Would he have stopped him? Maybe he would have caught him at some point. But yeah, I think it would have just been a slightly different narrative had he been given a bit more time.
George, as someone who is not a boxer, how much of, as in I'm not the boxer, not you, how much of Canelo's been a professional for since he was 15? I think he's had twice as many fights as Callum Smith, despite being the same age. How much of what he has is, for want of a better word, natural? How much of it is just the fact that he's been in so many fights, been doing this for so long, and how much of it is learned? Do you think? I know you don't know, but do you think?
It'd be a bit of everything, man. I think, it's all learned behavior. Some things people fighters have inside them, that, tenacity, that will to win, that aggression, that even. But then the stuff that's learned is, if you talk about a clever fighter, they're in the gym absorbing. They're either absorbing from the guys around them, from their coaches, from their own experiences, from studying tapes. That's how they become the fighters that they are. And I think now the amazing thing about fighters that can get to the top, stay at the top this long is motivation. The able that they can put their body through the mill, time and time again, and it's not always, the punishment that you might take on fight night, because you look at Alvarez, didn't look that marked up after the fight. He's had 12 rounds with a big guy. He took a few shots, but, didn't really look marked up. But it's the accumulation of training, the accumulation of sparring, the accumulation of everything. And just as important, the mental side of it, being involved in huge fights time and time again, having to deal with the pressure of being, a superstar for so long. Maybe you just end up, people like Alvarez just end up in this situation. They don't really know much else. and then they end up thriving inside it. You know, I try to. You take a punt before the fight starts. You're like, well, maybe he's left his long-term promoters in Golden Boy. Did that come to an amicable end, or was that is a bit of bitterness there? Is there some resentment there? Is there problems there? Stuff that's gonna still needs to play out that might be playing on the back of his mind. He's back on DAZN, but I don't think it's part of his original DAZN deal, which was publicized a mega money deal. So is he taking a massive pay cut? Is he fighting this big guy who he necessarily wouldn't be his first choice? Is the easier fight Billy Joe Saunders because he's that much smaller? But they couldn't make the Saunders fight, so I'll fight anyone. Don't worry about it. Anyone but Golovkin. I'm sick and tired of hearing about Golovkin. So he's gone for Smith, who was the number 1 ranked super middleweight in the world. Now he is. So there's an accumulation of all, I think a combination, of all of them things, natural ability, temperament, behavior, who you are, and then just being willing to push yourself, be in the gym, be dedicated to your craft, to absorb, to get better time and time again. And it is astonishing, like he's one of them. He's definitely falls into that category now for me of someone like, what's the motivation now? What do you need to do? He signed it. He did sign this mega deal with DAZN that hasn't come through, but it was a 5 or 6 fight deal. Would that be it? Is he thinking, you know what, that'll do me? That's enough money for me now. Or no, I feel fresh. I don't know nothing else. I'm enjoying it. I'm still at the top. I want to carry on. It's a strange one, but definitely to be enjoyed. I think while he's here, he's a special talent.
Absolutely, and from everything he said, it sounds like he will carry on. I don't think anyone would argue that he's pound for pound number 1, a massive star, earned loads of money. But is there I don't want to say he's disliked. I think that's the wrong word. But he is. He's not particularly, from what I can see, bothered about being popular. He clearly understands English because he'll listen to a question without it being translated, but then answer in Spanish. I'm not saying that every fighter should be speaking English, but there's no argument that it does help, given he fights in America. Could he be a bigger star, maybe out of the ring?
I mean, maybe. And speaking as a non-Mexican, it's hard to gauge because he's adored by Mexicans. And a lot of the Mexican fighters didn't speak English and didn't court that adulation. I think there's a lot to be said for being able to speak English and being able to convey your story because he's got an amazing one. And yeah, maybe that hasn't happened. I don't think he cares one bit. Because if he did, I think he'd try and cultivate a bit more, a bit like someone like Vladimir Klitschko did, or even more so, Golovkin did at one point, by bringing him over and trying to, establish himself in America. Yeah, I do know what you mean. There is a little bit, and again, Mexican people would think, what are you going on about? But from our point of view and our perspective, I would say there is a little bit of that. I don't think it's going to affect how he's rated in history, but there is something about the story that people engage with boxers, and you just look at the university loved boxers is because of the story, and it's about who they are as people. So there is a little bit left on the table from Canelo in that sense, but yeah, I don't think he cares. I genuinely think when you do wonder what's he got left, like what's he got left to achieve, I think he's got eyes on being remembered as one of the greatest ever, and that's why he's going up and boxing someone like Callum Smith at super middleweight. And I think he'll stick around and try and have massive legacy fights, which it's just a Mexican frame of mind. That's what they do. They go and they find great fights and they try and win them because they know that they'll be remembered off that. He doesn't need money. I guess that he would have taken some sort of a pay cut from DAZN. That was the whole problem. But he's still being paid eye-watering amounts of money. But yeah, in answer to your question, I think there is a little bit left on the table in that sense, but I genuinely don't think he cares, and I don't think it will change because, yeah, he does speak a bit of English. I remember, I don't know if you were there, Martin, when him and Golovkin came over for press conferences ahead of their fights, and did he come over for the Smith fight? I can't remember, the Liam Smith fight, but he spoke English then, and this was a good few years ago. I remember him doing a bit in English with us, with the reporters. A lot of the time, they don't like speaking English because they don't want to get misquoted and they can't get across
what they actually want to say. But I think he probably speaks pretty good English. Like, he could do it if he wanted to, but he doesn't. And I say fair play to him. Carry on. Like, he's not interested in that side of it. He's doing his thing. His people adore him, and it hasn't affected his standing as the number one draw and the number one fighter on the planet. So I think he'll just crack on and look for big fights. You do look around and think, okay, who's he going to fight? Because he's not going to go up and fight Bivol. He's not going to fight Beterbiev, or maybe he will. Then is he going to have the trilogy fight with Golovkin? It's an interesting one, and he's really not that old. He's been around for ages, but he's not that old.
You're right. There's 3 weight divisions, really, potentially middle, super middle, and light heavy that he could target. And would you really be surprised with his choices? I think after the fight, he made a point of saying he wants to unify the division. So he's got 2 belts. They've got Caleb Plant, who takes on Caleb Truax in January, and then, of course, Billy Joe Saunders is the other one. We'll come to, let's stick with super middleweight. Does Billy Joe Saunders give Canelo more trouble, George?
No, I don't think so. I think it probably will be much of the same in that it'll be a one-sided fight, in my opinion. I think I haven't, much like before the fight last night, I would say with Callum Smith blows hot and cold, and cold more often than hot. The same can be said about Saunders. I think this is why neither of them have boxed Alvarez yet until this point, because they hadn't earned that right. They hadn't been in exciting fights. They hadn't put in the performances that would sort of lead you to that mega fight. So, but I think now he's alluding that he wants to clean up the division. There's not an awful lot out there really in super middleweight division in terms of the big names, the legacy fights. So the next best thing is to pick up titles, and I think Saunders will be the same thing. I think Saunders is not big enough. He don't hit hard enough. He's got fast hands, and he has good defensive skills, and he can be elusive and a little bit awkward and tricky. But you're talking about being in against one of the best guys at breaking opponents down. His timing is exceptional. It's his timing that allowed him to land jabs on Callum Smith last night. It's his timing that allowed him to land all these big shots, because he just reads all the little tells so well. Saunders does the same, but not consistently, and doesn't have the punch power to back it up. So we can see him being, awkward enough to survive the fight, but like to get to the end of 12 rounds. But I can't see him putting any sort of dent in Alvarez at all. I think, what I'm surprised hasn't happened sooner. If Smith does decide to come back sooner and stays at super middleweight, then that's obviously a logical fight. It would be 2 Brits fighting for a world title. But probably actually thinking about that might be kind of unlikely. Eddie Hearn was after the fight this morning saying that the unwritten plan is that Alvarez fights Billy Joe Saunders for the WBO and then fights Golovkin at the end of next year. So maybe that's already on the cards, and that's what it will be. But I can't really see Saunders being able to compete with that, to be honest. Because he's just he just doesn't have the form. He's never showed us that he could match what Alvarez, the form that Alvarez is in right now. So yeah.
I might have you confused with someone else. I think when we talked about this fight before, you said it would be an easy night for Canelo, did you?
Against Saunders?
Yeah.
No, I actually think I disagree slightly. I don't see him winning the fight, but I think style-wise, I've always thought that style-wise, Saunders is the worst one for Canelo, because you just have to look at like the Lara fight and stuff like that, where he doesn't quite. He much prefers people who are a little bit less mobile. And who he can get his shots off, and he can stalk them a bit and, get them against the ropes. Saunders very elusive, fast hands and feet, good defensively. I agree with George. I don't think he's really got the pop to put a dent in him. But I think it's one of those where I don't think Canelo would look very good. Whereas last night he looked really good. I don't see him looking good against Saunders. Still winning the fight, and I feel like Golden Boy always knew that with Saunders, and that's why they didn't go anywhere near him. They saw what he did to Lemieux, one of their other fighters, obviously not the same caliber as Canelo, but they saw what he did and they thought, okay, we could probably do without that. It's not going to make for an exciting fight, and it's not going to make our guy look any better, which is really, that's what Golden Boy wanted to do. They wanted to make him look like a star, and they did that. And also, again, you just have to look at the quality of opponents. Look at who Canelo's fought over the last 4 years, and then look who Saunders has fought. And you just think he's clearly unbelievably talented, Saunders, naturally gifted, went to the Olympics at 18 or whatever it was. He's a ridiculous talent, but how can you go from the level of boxers that he's faced into a Canelo fight and pick him with any confidence? You can't, because Canelo's done it against the best in the sport and Saunders just hasn't. So it's again one of them where you'd have to be picking on based on stuff we haven't seen yet. I think Saunders is a great fighter, but yeah, I just don't see how can you go into a Canelo fight. But I do think he'd give it a good go. It would be one of those fights where I don't think an awful lot would happen in the rounds, but Canelo would probably nick him and have his moments in the fight as well and would win another unanimous decision. But I don't think it does anything for him apart from getting the belt. I'd like to see it though. I'd love to see that. I'd love to see the Plant fight. Again, Plant's another good boxer, a bit bigger, a bit more power, a bit more pop. That'd be great to see as well against Canelo. So yeah, I think it's happy days for him at super middleweight, and that's without even thinking about the other divisions. So yeah, hopefully, I mean, I think he said that he wants to box in Mexico in February. So I guess that he'd probably box Yildirim, who's his WBC mandatory, who he'd obviously beat handily, and then look at the other belts. So I think it could be a good couple of years for him.
You mentioned Golovkin, George. You can almost see his eyes roll whenever he's asked about it, Canelo. In his opinion, of course, well, the facts say he won one and drew the other. And if you're talking about him as a second fight or even a third fight next year, it's another year on a 38-year-old man in Golovkin. Of course, he did deal very quickly with, well, not quickly, but sorry, very easily with Camille. Oh, that's gone. Zedameta. That's the one. On Friday night, dropped him 4 times, stopped him in the 7th. Actually, quite a shame, I think. Friday night, you've got Golovkin faces another IBF mandatory who's questionable, and then 24 hours later, you've got his great rival. Puts on a masterclass against, at the time, the best in the division, but it feels like there's only one man of the two who wants that fight, really. And the longer we wait, it could actually be quite a bad night for Golovkin, possibly.
Yeah, well, definitely at 38, and his last, I haven't seen his fight at the weekend. Annoyingly, I was just didn't catch it at enough time. But I know he hasn't really looked in the form he once was. When you go back through the years when he was such a long reigning middleweight champion, wins over Martin Murray and the like. So he's had to. Alvarez has the win over Golovkin, and part of him probably just doesn't want to go back there. Like, he's not going to be as motivated for this fight as Golovkin when Golovkin wants to rewrite history. But as you say, there's 24 rounds between them, and there's not a lot in it for a lot of people, and there is a large percentage of the boxing public out there that think Golovkin should have won one, if not both of them fights. So I think it might just take someone to sit down and tell Alvarez, let's put the record straight. We're hanging this fight out for another year or so. It's another year on Golovkin's clock, and then we'll go out and do a proper job on him. But it's going to. I think it will come down to timings. He definitely doesn't want to be bullied by a TV network or be told what to do. Do you know what I mean? He probably feels like he's achieved enough in his career to make his own decisions, make his own choices. He would have learned from Floyd Mayweather as an opponent. way back when. It was about 5, 6, 7 years ago now. That fight would have learned this is how you behave when you're the A side of the card. And he'll be wanting to definitely be in control of his own destiny. He won't like the fact that people have forced him into a fight that, whether he wants it or not, he wants to be in full control. Like even the lights above the ring last night said Soul Canelo Alvarez versus Smith. The champion's name was just a little bit on the edge, and them little things are important, and maybe in terms of the profile that, because Golovkin's been he's an amazing fighter. He's going to go down as one of the best middleweights of all time. Still incredibly popular, but it might just come down to a battle of popularity to a certain degree, and we spoke about it earlier about has everyone sort of got behind Alvarez yet? Is he going to be that massive superstar? And I think the only thing really holding him back is a tight decision that he got the nod against Gennady Golovkin, who is an extremely popular fighter. If he goes out there and beats him convincingly, and really needs to do it sooner rather than later, so that you don't want Golovkin to be into his 40s when this fight happens, because then it kind of will take away a slight bit of the legitimacy. But I think next year it'll be perfect. I think be a fight definitely well want to see. I think Golovkin also hasn't moved up the divisions, but if he said tomorrow he's a super middleweight, where would you rank him in the super middleweight division? You might throw him in at number 1, number 2, wouldn't you? So he's one of them guys that they are a level above the other names in and around those weight divisions right now, in my opinion. And definitely a fight we want to see. I'd love to see it next year. I'd love to see it next, but I don't think Alvarez wants to be told what to do. More than anything else, he'll pick when he's ready.
There's a question deck that's come in. Does Saunders against Golovkin make more sense? Saunders got nothing to offer Canelo but a belt, but he could earn the fight with a win over Triple G.
Yeah, I love that fight, and much the same as with us with Canelo. Other than Canelo, I think Saunders is the one that gives Golovkin problems, and Saunders fancied that fight. They properly signed for it. It was going to happen at Kazakhstan Expo a couple of years ago. They signed for it. It was going to happen when he was at the peak of his power. So I'd love that fight. I'm sure Golovkin, Saunders would obviously, but I actually don't think Golovkin's got any interest in moving up at the moment. I spoke to him last week before, as part of the fight week for ahead of the Cerebetta fight. No interest really. He got this 21st defense. Caveat: some of the defenses were with the WBA regular middleweight title, but he's one of these guys, a bit like Marvin Hagler, who's gone, no, I'm a middleweight. I'm going to dominate at middleweight. Whoever pops up, I'm going to beat them. Not interested in going up and down divisions, finding big fights. So if he does decide to go up, that would be a natural fight, but I'm not sure he's going to. I'd love to see it. Saunders would love to. It'd be amazing for Saunders, because imagine, we said, he struggled to get momentum on his career, but if he was to go and beat Golovkin, that's the way to do it. And then he would get a Canelo fight, drop of a hat. So yeah, I'd love to see that, but I'm just not sure if Golovkin's going to go up. I really don't.
But if Saunders could, you not think he could still make middleweight?
Yeah, I'm sure he could actually for that fight. So, but then he's got the belt at super middle, hasn't he? So that's what would make it attractive, I would guess, for Golovkin.
I don't think Alvarez is ever coming back down to middleweight. So if Golovkin wants to fight Alvarez, I think he's got to come up. It's going to be a 168. It's going to be a super middleweight fight. And if you're right, he doesn't seem keen on moving out from that middleweight division, but he's going to want that fight. And if something like picking up a world title along the way, just to force the hand, then that makes a lot of sense. That'd be a good fight, a great fight. Golovkin Saunders, people will be interested in it, especially if people think that Golovkin's better days are slightly behind him. There'll be more people out there that would think Saunders could win. It would make for a very exciting build-up and an interesting fight.
perhaps difficult to match Golovkin out with those fights. Dick, I mean, if we assume they probably aren't going to happen, let's say the first half of next year, difficult to see where he goes next, unless he also targets unifying the middleweight division again.
Yeah, I mean, there is a bit of that, and I guess that's why he ended up boxing his mandatory, which no one really wanted to see, but obviously he has to keep his belt. I mean, he looked sensational shape for middleweight. He doesn't look like, as he's getting older, he's finding it hard to make. He looked the best I've ever seen him. I mean, the intense tan helped, but yeah, I mean, what does he do at middleweight? I mean, there are fights though. There are people, and yeah, maybe people will come down like Chris Eubank Jr. What weight? Where's he sitting at the moment? That'd be a big fight for him. And if you look at Golovkin's record, he hasn't always fought the best out there. Like there was a Steve Rolls fight, Willie Monroe Jr., and that he takes these guys and then and it sort of leads him into Canelo fights, as it were. So I don't know. If he's staying at middleweight, yeah, his options are limited, but there's enough out there. There's enough out there for it's also, we don't know what's going to happen with Demetrius Andrade as well. That'd be a great fight for him, but what weight's he going to be at? Yeah, my feeling is though that he's got no interest in going, and it might just be performative because he doesn't want to look like he's chasing Canelo by moving up, and that neither of them want to make out that they really want to chase the other guy. In fact, we were told last week no questions on Canelo and no questions on his DAZN deal. So that says it all. He's not interested in even answering questions about Canelo. If he wanted the fight and if he wanted to push it, he would be fielded. The whole press, every interview would be about Canelo. A bit like what we're seeing with Joshua and Fury. Joshua says, I don't want to talk about him. So I wonder that's why he's just peacocking a bit and saying, no, I'm at middleweight. This is where I am. I'm the king of middleweight. I've got no interest in going anywhere else. But it might be down to DAZN to put the pressure on. So I guess money will talk in that sense. But yeah, I mean, Canelo seems to have everything in his favour at the moment. And Golovkin is just sort of working his way back in.
Yeah, it's difficult to see. I'm just not sure I can see it because, as George said, I think Golovkin has to accept too much. He has to move up. He has to be very much the B side. And I mean, the only argument for Canelo to take that fight is just, and like it's like when I went back to say about does he care about being particularly popular outside of Mexico, and no, probably doesn't. I don't suspect he's particularly bothered if people think he lost one or both of the GGG fights, but. So for him the only reason to take it is that he knows he probably would do a job on him this time at almost 40 years old. But there's a lot more out there. You said you didn't think he'd go up to, or you shouldn't go up to light heavyweight for the big men, Beterbiev, Bivol. But what if he did? What if he did? Would he? I mean, would it be a step too far, or would you definitely?
He's a different breed, isn't he? Clearly, he's a different breed because he's happy to move up. Like, I mean, they targeted Kovalev. They saw it as a well-timed thing and to get the belt and stuff. But it's still Sergei Kovalev, and he was still the world champion. I don't really see. I don't know. It's not like they're massive money fights, and they're obviously ridiculously dangerous. I think he's happy at super middle, like George said. That is a good weight for him, even though he's going to be smaller than everyone. These big guys like Beterbiev and stuff, and again we spoke about Lomachenko. You can get beaten by the weight eventually, and like Beterbiev is a monster puncher, and okay, not on Canelo's level boxing wise, but does he want any of that? Does it do anything? I mean, it does masses for him, but they're not colossal names either. In boxing, everyone, the respect would be ridiculous, but I can't see it. I don't see the massive value in it right now. From a sort of business point of view, I can't see the reasoning for it. He might as well clean up at super middle and then think about it. And the other question is Callum Smith ready for those guys? Because I guess the only way is up for him as well. That
is the question. I think questions have been asked about his ability to make super middleweight since he turned pro. He was obviously always so tall. George, we don't know yet. Of course, it's one of those things fighters do say after a defeat. I'm not saying he does make the weight easily and he's lying, but I'm saying, it is often said, and then maybe in time they think, actually, it's better to be tight at one weight than to go up. If I'm sure you know what I mean. You'd rather be big at the one weight than small at the weight above. But if you were Callum Smith, would you be thinking about moving up?
I'd imagine he's high at the weight, and I'd imagine a lot of his flat performances have been weight related, whether he knows it or not. And last night he might have felt it in his legs a bit. Obviously, boxing in the States, so he's had to travel, right? So your body will hoard fluid like on a long haul flight. So everyone's different. Sometimes you land and might take 24 hours before you come back down to what the weight you anticipate you'll be, or maybe it might take 2, 3, 4, 5 days before you start getting back to where you should be. Everyone has a different sort of weight making strategy. He's definitely there's weight involved. Like, I haven't spoke with him or any of his team at length about stuff like that, but you can tell because weight was important to me, hydration and that, and I'd be looking. There's some telltale signs. You're looking at your opponent, you see how they got on with the weight this time round. And I'm sure you won't mind me saying, Andy Crolla said, he was out there with Saudi with me, and Smith. He's in Smith's corner, and they're like, "Oh, don't worry, look at him. Like, you take his sunglasses off. You look like death warmed up." And sometimes you can be sharp for a few rounds, but then you just fade. I felt like there was nothing really super sharp about Smith last night. There was no change. He couldn't change the gears a lot, and that's been, he's been like that a lot throughout his career. So I think it is a burden making that weight. I think going up will be refreshing. It probably won't even be easy for him to make light heavyweight. It'll still be a grueling task. It's not like he can move up and take the fight at late notice. But I don't think there was a rehydration clause from last night. So that would have been a good thing, a positive thing for him. But also, if that is the truth, that just leads me to believe that it's not a piece of cake for, not so much literally, but not a piece of cake for Alvarez to make the weight either, because he's probably going to have to cut some weight and he's going to be a lot heavier come fight night. Otherwise, if he don't put on no weight, then I guarantee the guy he's fighting is signed into a deal that's going to be the same. So he looks like the sort of guy, Alvarez, who fills out, and that's why I don't think he's ever going to see middleweight again. He probably appreciates the bigger guys who are a shade slower in front of him, because he can get his work off, because his timing is exceptional. If he can maintain his speed, his punch power is likely increasing with the increased mass, his size, his muscle that he's putting on. So he might be slightly having an easier time with it. Of course, the bigger guys absorb the shot better, and you got that risk of them, punching back harder, which, again, I don't think that makes a wise decision to go straight up to light heavyweight and try and take on the likes of Bayev and them guys. But yeah, so I think back to the original point, Smith making weight, I think is tough. I think he'll have a good old rest now, and then probably be thinking, how on earth am I ever going to make 175? So we'll see. I don't know. Maybe that was just me. Who knows?
One thing that always annoys me in boxing, Deck, is when, and listen, I'm not saying that obviously a defeat is difficult to take, but Callum Smith was the best super middleweight in the world, largely agreed. He's lost to an all-time great in all likelihood. Whether he moves up or stays where he is, I accept his next fight is not going to be for a world title, but it shouldn't be some sort of ticking over fight, some sort of 8-10 rounder. Well, it could be 8-10 rounds, but for me, it has to be at a good level. And if that's light heavyweight, give him a few months off by all means. But for me, there should be, it's going to be a step back because it's such a big step in the first place, but there shouldn't be some big leap back now.
No, I don't see him going and having a series of 6 rounders, for instance. But I get your point, but I do think there is a value to coming back not coming back at a massively, extremely high level, because he's just had a big fight at late. And to be honest, he's made a lot of money as well. He's got a young family, so he'll go and have some time off, and then he'll think about getting back into it and stuff, and they'll formulate a plan. Often that plan will be a few steps. It won't just be, right, let's go and try and fight this guy or whatever. And also, you got to remember as well, Callum Smith not the biggest name still in America, so it's not like he can go and make any crazy demands or whatever. I think he'll come. I do think he'll go up because there was a picture. It must have been 6 weeks ago now of all of them from Gallagher's gym, and he just looked colossal. And I wonder whether actually he'll be better when he goes up, because he'll just be stronger. And he's obviously a puncher. He likes to dominate behind the high guard. You know, you can't be drained like that. And that's what he looked like yesterday. Selfishly, I'd love him to go to light heavy, because then we chuck him in that mix of all the Brits. And then whoever emerges from that little lot, they're the ones who go on to fight for the titles. But I think there's money to be made and interesting fights for him. Just look at that mix, that Lyndon Arthur, Anthony Yard, Callum Johnson, Joshua Boatsi. Imagine adding Callum Smith into that mix as well. I mean, that's what I'd love to see. And then winning those sorts of fights, even just one of them, then you sort of get in the world title picture. So yeah, that would be a step down domestically, but what a great fight with any of those guys it would be, and an interesting fight, and one that would get the public talking and get people interested. And then it's also a big test ahead of one of the champions, because let's be honest, it's one of the hardest divisions right now is light heavyweight. They're absolute monsters up there. So in answer to your question, I think there would need to be a rebuild before you can go up and go into that. But I think he has opportunities for a quote unquote domestic fight that will be a brilliant fight and testing and big money as well. That's what I'd personally like to see. I'm interested to hear what the plan is for him. Whether he's going to be with Eddie, whether he's going to be on Sky, like, we don't really know.
He certainly sounds like a good plan, but psychologically, George, does Callum Smith not think, regardless of the weight, does he not think it'd be difficult to go back to domestic level? Like, I know these guys are still building themselves and still have aspirations at world level, but would it not be mentally difficult?
Yeah. I mean, Dex says he's got a young family. He's got he had a baby girl that, a year or so ago. He's been away from home, close to Christmas. He wants to get home now. He wants to have a break from boxing. He's probably been on edge the entire year, not knowing exactly what's happening, what's not. And I don't know what his purse was last night, but imagine it was very good. I know the purses in the World Boxing Series was very good, and then once he comes out of that on top. He probably got overpaid for fighting Hassim Ndam, might have got overpaid for fighting John Ryder, because he's now at that level. You can't cut people's pay as such, the fighters' pay. That's it. Just, but now they've got a legitimate excuse. Right, you lost your world title. You're gonna have to, start at the bottom, pick yourself up, and it might be tough for him to do at his age if he's, a little bit more comfortable, in his eye. He ain't got that hunger. He ain't got. Moving up a division will be interesting for him. I suppose it will be a chance to to get your teeth into a new challenge. And there are some good names there, British domestic level, with potential. Them guys are going to go on. But Callum Johnson, I think they might still be stable mates. I think they both trained out of the Gallagher gym for some years, so that likely fight wouldn't happen. Yard's just been beat with a rival, with Frank Warren, so maybe that ain't gonna happen. Lyndon Arthur, maybe he doesn't have the kudos for the name. Buatsi, that'd be a fantastic fight. But there's a lot of people out there who tip Buatsi to go all the way and win a world title. If he's managed and tested properly over the next year or so, does he want to come back down to what's being perceived as British title level in a new division for him against a tough guy and lose? Back-to-back losses. So
I'm sure Eddie Hearn wouldn't be in a rush to stick those two in together either.
Yeah, well, yeah, definitely not.
Well, that is. Well, in a boxing sense, that is pretty much it for 2020. Christmas is cancelled though, so we roll on. Next weekend, no fighting, of course, but the following weekend is, I mean, what a way to start the year. We're so used to, actually, the one thing about this pandemic, we're so used to a quiet January, quiet February. But we start on January 2nd with Luke Campbell against Ryan Garcia. Brilliant fight. I'm sure.
On DAZN.
All right, now you've left Premier Sports and now you're with DAZN, aren't you?
I've cancelled Premier Sports. No, put this. You've got to say £1.99, £2 for DAZN is obscene. I mean, I have no idea how long that can continue because we've had Golovkin on Friday, we've had Smith Canelo, we're going to have Garcia. It's just obscene value. So thanks for that, whoever is making those calls, and long may it continue.
Gee whiz. Free advertising for DAZN from Deck. But he's right, of course.
I'll tell you what's marginally better, Deck. Channel 5. I did Channel 5 on Friday. You ain't got to pay for that.
Actually, tell you what.
If you put number 5 on the telly, you're watching for nothing.
Yeah. Well,
I mean, so DAZN, when you think about it like that, it was actually a really good card. Like it was in terms of the fights that we had. Pitters against Richards, fantastic knockout, and the undercard, Mick Hennessy had a few 50-50s down. I thought he was bringing back the revival of the journeyman, the UK journeyman, the 200+ losses. But we didn't see that Friday night. He finished the year with a bang, and so that was free. Beat DAZN. We can listen to the radio.
Shout. Craig Richards, got to actually mention him. That was an unbelievable performance. Getting up from that, what a finish! I mean, he's a light heavyweight. Get him in there, and he's one who's had no break. He's with Eddie and with Matchroom, but you look at his journey; it's been a tough one, and he's had hard fights, and he's had to work for it. No one given much of a chance against Pitters. I think he was 10-3 any method, which is mad. Get him in that mix as well. I mean, Callum Smith, Craig Richards. No, I'm joking. I mean, it's a bit beyond, but he's British champion. I'd love to see him in with any of those guys. So yeah, and George did a great job, especially because you did it for free, I assume, as well.
Yeah. I mean, why would you not?
You bought a second house in Redditch, is that true?
No. Well, I bought. Yeah, you can call it a house. It's a television studio, actually. We'll do a lot of stuff out of there in the years to come. Once we hit tier 10 in Reddit,
you're only allowed to
place
exist
to
in
be.
Reddit.
Yeah, we live in a dark room. Commentate. It's going to be difficult because you're going to have to commentate whilst holding your breath.
Tier 10
run some
is
seminars
coming.
on it. Tier 10 is coming.
I'd take Garcia Campbell. Yeah. What a fight that is.
Garcia, what do we know about Garcia? Just quick, when we're going to profile it properly. But I see a clip on DAZN yesterday, and I don't know anything about him apart from he's Insta famous, which is it has to be brought up in every sentence. It would seem, So he's the next coming because of that. But he told me that God possessed his hands ahead of this knockout that they showed that went viral. He talks the talk. He absolutely tapped diligently to the minutest dial into that American audience. No wonder he's a superstar. They love it. Exciting. I mean, he's going up against Campbell. My old mate Campbell. I think he's not going to have it his own way. Be interesting. That's start of 21.
Yeah, very intriguing fight. As George said, we will have more on that next week. Please do join us then. As I said, if you're still watching, please like the video, subscribe to the channel. There's plenty more to come in 2021. Do have a good Christmas, a safe Christmas, of course, however you are able to spend it. George, Dex, been a pleasure. We've battled through, and we'll see you in a week's time.
Merry Christmas, boys.
Merry Christmas.